They do not leave with a fight, they leave with silence, a slower reply, a colder tone, a small shift you can feel in your chest before you can explain it with words. And somehow that hurts more because there is nothing clear to point at, nothing solid to blame, only the quiet fear that you are losing someone who was never fully there to begin with. If you have ever sat staring at your phone, reading the same dry message again and again, trying to decode what changed, this is for you, because what looks like disinterest is often something deeper, older, and far more hidden. Stay with me, because once you see this clearly, you will stop begging for closeness from people who panic when love gets real, and you will understand why the more you chase, the faster they fade. And more importantly, you will learn how to stop feeding the pattern that has been draining your peace, your confidence, and your sense of self for far too long. Maybe you know this feeling already. You meet someone, and at first it feels easy. There is chemistry, there is comfort, there are moments that feel honest and warm, the kind that make you believe something real is starting. Then the closeness deepens, and right when your heart begins to settle, they change. Not all at once. That is what makes it so confusing. They still answer, but not the same way. They still show up, but not with the same energy. They still care, but somehow from a distance. And then your mind starts racing. Did I say too much? Did I move too fast? Was I too emotional, too available, too easy to reach? So you try to fix it. You become softer, calmer, more understanding. You tell yourself not to ask for much. You give them room, then more room, then even more. And still, somehow, you feel like you are the one carrying the weight of the connection while they drift in and out as if nothing happened. Listen carefully, because this part changes everything. That cycle is not always a sign that you are asking for too much. Sometimes it is the sign that you are dealing with someone whose nervous system learned long ago that closeness is not comfort, it is danger. Most people talk about avoidant behavior like it is cruelty, like the person is heartless, careless, cold by choice. But that is too simple, and because it is too simple, it keeps people stuck. The truth is harder and sadder than that. Avoidant patterns are often built in childhood, in homes where emotions were ignored, where vulnerability felt embarrassing, where asking for comfort led to disappointment, rejection, or shame. A child learns fast. If love does not feel safe, the child adapts. They stop reaching. They become self-contained. They learn to survive by depending on nobody. That independence gets praised. It looks strong. It looks mature. It even looks attractive for a while. But later, in adult love, the old survival rule becomes a prison. Because real love asks for softness. It asks for trust. It asks for the risky sentence they learned never to say, "I need you." And the second that need starts to rise, the old alarm goes off inside them. Not in theory, in the body, in the chest, in the breath, in the urge to pull back before attachment turns into pain. So when they create space, it is not always because they feel nothing. Sometimes it is because they feel too much and they do not know how to stay present inside it. That is why this pattern becomes so painful for the person on the other side. You feel the distance and your body reads it as loss, maybe even danger, so you lean in, you text more, you explain more, you ask where you stand, you try to repair the connection before it breaks. It feels logical, it feels loving, it feels necessary, but to someone wired to fear closeness, your effort can land like pressure, and the more pressure they feel, the more their system says run. Then you feel even more abandoned, so you try even harder, and now both people are acting from fear while calling it love. This is the anxious avoidant loop, and it can make two decent people hurt each other again and again without ever understanding why. Keep watching, because most people only study the surface. They study the mixed signals, the disappearing acts, the hot and cold behavior, but very few look at the hidden wish under all that defense, the quiet fantasy living underneath the distance. And once you understand that hidden wish, you stop taking every withdrawal as proof that you are not enough, and you start seeing the deeper structure of what is actually happening. The avoidant does want love. That is important. They want depth. They want loyalty. They want someone who feels like home. But what they fear is the price they think love will demand from them. They do not dream of a relationship with no feeling. They dream of a relationship where closeness does not feel like captivity. They want someone who can love them without swallowing them. Someone who does not turn every shift in energy into a crisis meeting. Someone who does not collapse every time they need a little room to breathe. someone who has a real life, a real center, a real identity beyond the relationship, someone who chooses them, yes, but does not hang their entire emotional survival on every message, every mood, every small moment of contact. That is the fantasy so many people miss. They are not secretly wishing for a partner who asks for nothing and feels nothing. They are wishing for a partner whose love feels calm, grounded, and spacious. A partner who does not make intimacy feel like pressure. A partner who can stay connected without becoming consuming. And when someone like that appears, something unusual happens. The avoidant does not feel the same urge to run, because for once, the relationship does not feel like a trap closing around them. Now let me say something that may be hard to hear, but it matters. Many people who feel destroyed by avoidant partners are not only reacting to the avoidant, they are also reacting from an old wound of their own. There is often a deep history behind why inconsistency feels so addictive. If love in your early life was uncertain, conditional, hard to keep, or only available when you performed well, then a distant partner can feel strangely familiar. Painful, yes, but familiar. And the nervous system often confuses familiar with love. That is why the chase can become so intense. It is not just about wanting this one person. It is about replaying an older story and hoping this time it ends differently. Hoping this time your patience, your understanding, your loyalty, your emotional labor will finally earn the stable love you always wanted. But love that has to be constantly earned rarely feels peaceful for long. It feels exciting, it feels loaded, it feels high stakes. And because it feels high stakes, it can fool you into thinking it is profound. This is why your own healing matters just as much as understanding theirs. Because if you do not understand what in you is attached to the chase, you will keep calling self-abandonment devotion and keep mistaking emotional hunger for deep connection. So what does this person truly imagine when they imagine safe love? They imagine being close to someone without feeling managed. They imagine spending a day alone without having to explain that it does not mean rejection. They imagine caring deeply without feeling responsible for regulating another person's entire emotional world. They imagine a relationship where silence for a few hours is not treated like betrayal, where personal space is not framed as lack of love, where every difficult moment does not turn into a heavy conversation that leaves them feeling cornered. And here is the strange part. The more you chase them for reassurance, the more you accidentally prove their oldest fear, that closeness will come with demands they cannot meet. But when you step back in a real way, not to punish them, not to manipulate them, not to perform fake indifference, but because you are actually grounded in your own life, their system can finally relax enough to feel your absence without being overwhelmed by your presence. That is when curiosity starts to return. That is when they begin to wonder about you instead of trying to recover from you. This is not a trick. It is not a game. It is what happens when space is given freely instead of being fought over in panic and resentment. And that leads to something most people never learn in time. There is a window after withdrawal when the avoidant begins to come back online emotionally. During the shutdown phase, chasing rarely helps. Calls, long texts, repeated check-ins, emotional paragraphs, constant questions about where things stand, all of that often pushes them deeper into retreat. But when you stop flooding the space and return to your own center, something shifts. The silence no longer feels like a battlefield. It becomes room. They settle, the panic lowers, and then, sometimes, not always, but often enough to matter, they begin to reach back. They send the message, they make the joke, they ask how you are, they test the connection again. That moment only appears when the space is not crowded by pressure. This is why secure people often seem magnetic to avoidant people, not because they are cold, not because they are unavailable, but because they do not create extra danger around normal distance. They do not chase what briefly moves away. They stay steady, they remain open, but they remain whole. And wholeness is deeply calming to someone whose entire system expects love to become emotionally overwhelming sooner or later. There are also certain triggers that make the pattern worse fast. Repeated requests for reassurance can do it. Not because reassurance is wrong, but because when it becomes constant, the avoidant hears demand before they hear love. Turning the relationship into the topic of every conversation can do it too. If every small distance becomes a long discussion about feelings, commitment, and what the silence means, they start associating connection with exhaustion. Escalating when they go quiet makes it worse. They pull back, you react strongly, they pull back more, and now both people are locked in a cycle, neither knows how to stop. Long emotional speeches can overwhelm them as well, especially if they never learned healthy emotional language growing up. What feels clear and honest to you can feel like too much input to them. Even conflict becomes distorted. If you unload all your pain at once, they may stop listening before the real message lands. But if you speak clearly and simply, if you say something like, "I missed you this week," or "I felt a little far from you lately," they are more likely to hear it without shutting down. Your feelings matter. They matter deeply. The point is not to silence yourself. The point is to understand what kind of delivery opens a door and what kind closes it. At the same time, this is not only about what to avoid, it is also about what to build. Give space before it becomes a fight. Let them breathe without forcing them to ask for air. Be curious about their inner world, but do not interrogate it. Ask something real, then let the question rest. Do not stand over the answer waiting for it to come out perfectly. Be consistent. That matters more than people think. If you swing from warm to cold, from patient to reactive, from chasing to pretending you do not care, they do not feel safer, they feel more guarded. But when your energy is calm, steady, and honest, their body starts learning that closeness with you does not always lead to chaos. Have your own support system, your own work, your own friendships, your own routines, your own joy, not as a performance, not to make them jealous, not to look mysterious, for real. Because when your life is full, you stop squeezing the relationship for every drop of emotional meaning, and that changes the entire atmosphere. They no longer feel like they are being asked to carry everything. They feel like they are joining a life, not becoming the only pillar holding it up. That is the kind of connection they can breathe inside. But be careful here, because this is where people start abandoning themselves while calling it growth. Becoming grounded is healthy. Becoming smaller is not. Learning not to chase is healthy. Pretending you have no needs is not. Respecting space is healthy. Erasing your feelings so the other person stays comfortable is not. If you start editing yourself into silence, swallowing every hurt, acting unaffected when you're actually in pain, that is not security. That is self-loss with better branding. And eventually it will break you. Then all the buried emotion will explode at once, and the relationship will become exactly what both people feared. One person starved, one person overwhelmed, both people misunderstood. So, hear this clearly, the goal is not to become less alive, less expressive, less human. The goal is to become more rooted, more clear, more able to feel your feelings without turning every feeling into an emergency, more able to say what is true without begging to be chosen, more able to hold your dignity even when another person is confused, avoidant, inconsistent, or slow to meet you. That is different, that is powerful, and an avoidant person can feel the difference. They can usually tell when your distance is a mask and when your steadiness is real. A lot of change begins when you stop making the relationship the center of your entire emotional universe. When they go quiet, you do not spiral for 6 hours building stories in your mind. You go back to your life, you work, you rest, you see your friends. You move your body, you make art, you read, you laugh, you stop treating their silence like a courtroom where your worth is being judged. And the wild thing is, this does not only protect you, it also changes the relationship dynamic. Because now they are no longer relating to someone who is gripping the bond with white knuckles. They are relating to someone who is present, caring, and strong enough to let things breathe. That kind of energy is hard to walk away from, not because it is dramatic, because it is rare. Most people either cling or detach. Very few know how to remain warm without becoming consumed. Very few know how to care without collapsing. Very few know how to say "I love you" and still keep both feet under themselves. But that is the energy that softens fear. That is the energy that invites closeness without forcing it. And if the other person has any willingness to grow at all, that is the environment where growth becomes more possible than it has ever been before. Still, none of this means you should live on hope alone. This part matters. You have to grieve the fantasy of the relationship you wished this person would give you easily. The version where they naturally text first, naturally reassure you, naturally lean in when things get serious, naturally make intimacy feel simple and mutual. That version may not be available with them right now, maybe not ever. and if you keep holding the dream tighter than the reality, you will stay trapped in a painful waiting room, telling yourself that one more insight, one more act of patience, one more season of understanding will finally unlock the love you crave. Sometimes growth does happen. Sometimes an avoidant person does wake up, go to therapy, face their fear, learn to stay, and slowly become capable of real secure love. But sometimes they do not. Sometimes they enjoy the comfort you provide while resisting every deeper level of responsibility. Sometimes they like your steadiness, but never use it to grow. Sometimes they accept the space and never walk back across it. And when that is the truth, no amount of understanding will turn waiting into a relationship. At that point, the deeper question is no longer how to love them better. It is whether you are slowly building a life around somebody who is still undecided about fully joining yours. Because there are really two versions of this story. In one version, you do your work, they do theirs, and over time, something beautiful starts to form. It is not perfect, it is not quick, but it is real. The old alarms get softer, the hard talks get easier. They stop treating closeness like a threat. You stop treating distance like proof of abandonment. Trust grows, safety grows. Love becomes less like a battlefield and more like a place to rest. In the other version, you become more secure, more balanced, more self-aware, and they still do not meet you halfway. They still vanish, still dodge, still leave you reading between lines that should not be there in the first place. If that is the version you are living, your growth is not meant to help you tolerate more pain. It is meant to help you recognize what is not being returned. You are not responsible for healing someone who refuses to face themselves. You can be kind, you can be patient, you can be deeply understanding, but you cannot do another person's inner work for them. You cannot love them into a level of emotional safety they have not chosen, and you cannot keep pouring from an empty cup just because part of you is still hoping this time the ending will be different. Sometimes self-respect is not loud. Sometimes it is simply the quiet refusal to keep auditioning for a role you should have been offered freely. When avoidant people do change, truly change, the shift usually begins the same way. They meet someone who does not confirm the old fear, not someone perfect, not someone endlessly tolerant of bad behavior, someone real, someone mature enough to stay calm without becoming numb, someone loving enough to stay open without becoming desperate. Someone who has a life that does not collapse when connection gets uncertain. In the presence of that kind of person, the old rule begins to crack. Love does not always mean suffocation. Closeness does not always mean losing freedom. Need does not always lead to shame. The body learns slowly. The mind argues. The old habits fight back. They may still pull away sometimes. They may still freeze when intimacy gets deep. But if they are willing, if they are honest, if they are doing the work, they begin to come back faster, speak more clearly, and tolerate more closeness without running from it. That is the real transformation. Not becoming a different person overnight, but learning that connection can exist without erasing identity, that love can hold space instead of taking it away, that staying near another person does not have to feel like disappearing. And for two people who are both healing, that realization can become the foundation of something strong, soft, and deeply life-changing. So if you love someone like this, remember a few simple truths and hold them close. Their distance is not a verdict on your value. More effort from you will not heal wounds they are protecting. Your own healing matters just as much as your understanding of them. Boundaries are not threats. They are self-respect made visible. If they are trying, truly trying, your steadiness can help create safety. If they are not trying, your steadiness should help you leave what is starving you. You are allowed to want tenderness that does not feel like a puzzle. You are allowed to want communication that does not depend on guessing games. You are allowed to want a love where you do not have to translate every silence into meaning and every breadcrumb into hope. And here is the deepest truth of all. The avoidant dream is not distance, it is freedom inside love. Real freedom. The freedom to care without drowning. The freedom to be close without disappearing. The freedom to stay connected and still remain fully themselves. If you can offer that from a place of real wholeness, not performance, not fear, not self-erasure, then you become unforgettable. Not because you chased, not because you bent yourself into the perfect shape, but but because you showed them a kind of love that feels safe enough to stay near, and whether they are ready for that or not, let this be the moment you stop running after people who only know how to love in retreat and start becoming someone who never has to beg to be met.